All right, back for another core set review. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the non-legendary new cards from the core set. Check past reviews if you want to see legendaries and maybe one more future review if you want to see some of the rebalanced cards. For now, though, this is Reckoning for Paladin, a new secret, and of course, 1 mana. After an enemy minion deals 3 or more damage, destroy it. And that's cool. I really, really like this effect a lot. Because first off, it's tempo based. It's providing removal. It's playing towards the board. Where some paladin secrets sometimes feel a little sneaky or like they're not really making enough board impact. As you can see behind this card, Paladin's also going to keep Avenge and Noble Sacrifice. So a lot of board based secrets in core, which is pretty cool. I think they're all going to play together really nicely. And the cool thing about Reckoning is that it kind of filters its targets. So, sometimes you don't want a 1/1 triggering your Noble Sacrifice. That sucks. But if there's a 1/1 on board and it's hitting something, it's not going to trigger Reckoning because it's only dealing 1 damage. But if there's a 5/5 next to it, when that 5/5 attacks and deals 5 damage, boom, the 5/5 gets killed instead. And that makes Reckoning this much more valuable tool because it filters up towards better sorts of targets. So that could create some real high friction for your opponent where they don't really want to attack with that 5/5. They're kind of stuck. They can't really use it, or if they do, they risk losing it. Maybe it's worth it for them to deal that damage and go face. This won't prevent lethal because it's after an enemy minion deals damage. So, still some ways to work around this potentially, but occasionally it's going to hit that great target. I think it's going to be a really cheap removal tool for 1 mana and cause a lot of problems for your opponent, which is exactly what you're looking for secrets. Now, Paladin has a secret problem in general where sometimes their secrets just don't do enough for 1 mana. And building a deck around them to support them is awkward. So it's going to need support. It's not going to get there on its own. I don't know. Did we get Mysterious Challenger back? No, we didn't get Mysterious Challenger back. So something's going to have to come along to really make this sing because I don't think on its own it's still enough. It might be as a cheap removal pressure plate sort of card, right? A vaporize sort of thing almost, but even better in some ways. It's possible, but it needs support. It needs help. So you can't go out and say this is an amazing secret because secrets are really dependent on other things in Paladin in particular to shine. And I think this is a cool secret. One of my favorite secret designs in Paladin, maybe overall. So I hope it works, but not that confident yet. So next up here is a pretty crazy card, Pursuit of Justice. It's a 2 mana spell and it reads, give +1 attack to Silverhand recruits you summon this game. So this is a permanent aura effect. Any Silverhand recruits that get summoned are naturally going to come out as 2/1s. If you play 2 of these, they're going to come out as 3/1s, making them notably more threatening on board, making your hero power great, but also making any kind of Silverhand summon or support card much more powerful as well. And we've already seen this Silverhand recruit stuff teased with cards like Lothraxian. And this just seems to bring it home. I think you could get some really nice mid-game boards that are very high pressured and somewhat awkward to deal with these just super buffed 3/1 Divine Shield Silverhand recruits just getting summoned over and over and over again. Thank God this can't go in odd Paladin in Wild since it's 2 mana. But even in Standard, I definitely see a card like this fueling an archetype that's just an army of dudes because this adds up to a lot of buffs over time for 2 mana. The one downside, right, is that, if you're trying to play this on curve or squeeze it into an early curve, you're not going to be getting as much tempo. And a deck that cares a lot about little minions on board often cares about tempo. So there might be a little bit of a conflict of interest trying to fit this into the game plan. But if you look at a lot of the Silverhand recruit stuff, a lot of it actually hits in the mid game. And you're looking for these big reload turns and big power turns where you swing things in the mid game. You're not really looking for chip tempo over the course of, the first few turns of the game necessarily. So I don't think that'll necessarily be a huge hindrance for Pursuit of Justice, which I think means this could potentially be a very meta relevant card. All right, next I'm moving over to everybody's favorite Demon Hunter. This is the Gennarglaive Smith, a 3 mana 3/2. It's a demon and outcast. Give your hero +3 attack this turn. I mean, look, guys, everybody knows Demon Hunter was short on attack cards. They weren't ever able to attack with a hero. They never had quite enough damage. So, I mean, thank God Blizzard. Well, no, that's not true. Demon Hunters had plenty of damage. And I think that might be a reason this card actually falls a little bit behind. It's just got a lot of competing to do against a ton of other Demon Hunter cards. And because of that outcast limitation, it might just be a little bit awkward to run. I think There are other less conditional cards that will just fit into your turns better, will fit game plans better, where this one doesn't quite make the cut. Now, I want to be clear, like, this is a lot of output for a 3-mana card. Like, the +3 attack's a huge upside on this size of a body for 3 mana. I think that's really cool. Has other outcast bonuses, might trigger other sorts of outcast cards. So there's some playability to it. It's fine. It's you generate this off something, you're gonna be happy. It's cool. Fits into the story of Demon Hunter. But I just don't think it's enough to make the cut in the deck list very often. I think this one will fall to the wayside for other Demon Hunter game plans and just cards that are slightly more efficient or broken or doing crazy things. Whereas this one feels sort of fair in the scheme of Demon Hunter, right? Compared to like an SI7 agent, you're like, well, yeah, okay. It's not crazy, right? It's just fine. And Demon Hunter doesn't usually do just fine. They do awesome. So this card's really, really intriguing. The Illidar Inquisitor. It's an 8-mana, 8/8 demon, and it's got Rush. And it reads, after your hero attacks an enemy, this attacks it too. So potentially 8 damage to the face. All you gotta do is hero power face or use your weapon, and this thing's slamming face, and then also potentially resolving a minion on board, which is pretty crazy. Like, that's a ton of extra damage output. Now, I mean, the thing is, it's 8 mana, right? And not many Demon Hunter decks are playing to 8 mana. Even things like Soul Fragment Demon Hunter, they might get to 8 mana, but they're squeezing together multiple smaller things in a turn. I don't know if they'd have room for a card like Illidar Inquisitor, but this is a demon, and that could maybe open up a big demon angle for this card, because it seems like a great finishing tool in those decks that's still, maintaining board. It's keeping you alive while also still putting in a ton of pressure, which is Demon Hunter's lifeblood. That's what they love to do. So I'm hopeful that this opens up a maybe slightly slower but still pressure-based big Demon Hunter deck, because this seems like a really nice tool there. And, I think it still has a possibility in one of those like Soul Fragment decks as the top end of the curve, as just being a way to push a ton of damage and stay alive an extra turn by taking a big clear. Keep an eye on this one, because a card that hits face that hard is something to think about. And it just seems like it's got a lot going on. Just that cost is high, but man, does it pack a wallop. All right, next up here is the nordrassil druid, a 4-mana 3/5 minion for druid with a battle cry. The next spell you cast this turn costs 3 less. So some more spell discount stuff here for druid. Now, of course, naturally you're spending 4 mana here to discount by 3. So it's kind of like you're functionally getting a 1-mana 3/5 in this scenario. And, hey, a 1-mana 3/5 is definitely above stat. That's more than you'd expect as I slam my elbow into my desk. Oh God, I'm dead. But I don't know if it's exciting enough. We've already had a few cards like this in druid. You've had like the arcane elemental dude, I can't think of their names, and the Anubisath dude, where you play a big spell and they come down for free. And you even have the owl now as well that does the same sort of thing. It's more over time, right? But basically cheap minions that you're slotting into your spell-based deck. And for me, this looks like the least compelling of the sort, perhaps, because it's not totally free, first off, and the body, the minion, doesn't have rush, it doesn't have taunt, so it's not particularly impactful immediately on board. Sometimes dropping that Anubisath taunt's a huge deal. Sometimes getting that rush off your owl is a really big play, whereas this one might just be sitting there. It could be something cool where, it's just helpful to help maintain board presence and tempo when you're doing things like ramping or pushing towards an end-game goal, but it's still just a 3/5, and that's my big hesitation for this card. Is that quite enough? Does that really help you stay alive or get that extra little push in the mid-game? I don't think so. I don't think it's compelling enough. So unless there's a sneaky shenanigan I'm not seeing with this card, which, of course, please feel free to enlighten me in the comments below. To me, it just feels like it's not going to be big enough or good enough compared to the similar sorts of cards we've seen for druid in the past. All right, moving on here to the selective breeder for hunter. 2-mana 1/1. Battlecry, discover a copy of a beast in your deck. So a pretty intriguing little card here. You got to think about this one a little bit. At a base level, right, just discovering a thing in your deck on a 2-mana 1/1 body is okay. It's fine. You get to choose a card that might fit the situation or fill in your curve. It's, kind of like a tracking with a body and a bit of a mana cost tax, essentially. And tracking, by the way, got changed to just be discovering a card in your deck. So it's okay. But the real value here, or the real intriguing part of this, is that you're discovering a beast. And maybe in some cases, the copy aspect of it's interesting as well. So if you have a specific beast in your deck, one maybe you've shuffled with Dire Frenzy, or one that's just doing something cool, some kind of charge beast, or something that's setting up a combo, or some crazy value beast. This allows you to both find it, which is nice in some cases, just pull it out, tutor it's really good, but it's also a copy. So if you want multiples of them, maybe you can make some crazy play by copying it as well. So this card's almost more about, I think, the sneakiness or the like setup where you're going to try to do something really cool off of it, as opposed to just like a general, I'm just playing this to discover and cycle through my deck. I think that's way less compelling than the tutor aspect and the beast aspect. So that said, I don't think this is an everyday hunter card that's going into every list, but will it enable or support some kind of weird, wacky list that's looking for a very specific beast and trying to enable this, shenanigan game plan? I think it could. It's that sort of card, absolutely. So increasing draw consistency, duplicating threats and value cards, that's what this could do really well. So I don't think this card's going to be played every day or all the time, but certainly want to keep an eye on. All right, moving on over to Priest with Focused Will, a new 1-mana spell. It says silence a minion, then give it +3 health. So this is a cool card. First and foremost, it looks like Silence Priest support again. We saw that in the past a couple times. There's some halfway decent Silence Priest decks where you play minions with really bad downsides, but then you silence them away and use them for aggression or just as really strong early game minions. This could do that well, right? It silences something and then it gives it a buff as well. So you could play like a health buff style. You could play Silence Priest style. This offers a lot of utility there, but you could also, if you need to, use this aggressively against your opponent, if they have a crazy high value card on board with a bunch of Librams stacked on it or whatever, you're not going to care if it gets 3 extra health. You're going to care about silencing that effect. So it's not great to give it 3 health, but sometimes a silence is a silence and the 3 health doesn't really matter in the scheme of the game. So a little bit of flexibility here with Focused Will, which is nice. A lot of these in the past had said silence a friendly minion and they felt really limited. This one feels like it has that utility in a pinch, which is cool. Now that said, of course, for a deck like this to work, it takes a lot of pieces to come together and a lot of cards to support it. So it's definitely risky to say this is going to be a star that's going to support an entire deck. And in particular, compared to cards like Purify in the past, which, my God, it looked like one of the worst cards ever, the only reason it worked in a Silence Priest deck was because it could cycle, it could keep things moving, and play to that game plan. Focus Will, I'm not sure, supports Priest very well with low-cost cards because Priest still doesn't have a ton of card draw, at least not yet, unless they print a ton in Forged in the Barrens. So at the moment, the way Priest is being designed and played, it feels like this card is just going to choke your deck out and you're not going to have enough cards left. You're going to run out of gas and may not be strong enough to get there. But there's all this crazy health buff stuff coming along. We just haven't seen it work yet. So it's hard to put any faith or interest in it because it keeps seeming to whiff and whiff and whiff. But maybe Focused Will and the card we're about to talk about here in a second will somehow get it over the hump, although I'm very doubtful. So next up here is the Crimson Clergy, a new 1-mana 1/3 for Priest. After friendly characters healed, gain +1 attack. So you can see this being another kind of high health, early tempo Priest card. This one's more about healing than health buffs, but of course, when things get health buffs, they often get easier to heal because they got more health sticking around. And all that could play together pretty nicely. And this one scales to into some extra attack, which is cool. So this is basically Light Warden, right? We had Light Warden in the past. It was a 1-mana 1/2 neutral card, and it gained 2 attack when anything was healed. This is only friendly characters instead of anybody. So the crazy circly healing blow-ups on Light Warden aren't quite as possible with this card. It doesn't scale. It scales half as much attack and on theoretically half as many things. So it doesn't feel quite as upsidey as Light Warden, but frankly, having just that 3 health is a big deal on a 1-drop. It feels much, much safer to play on turn 1 and start scaling off of. So, it's a suitable 1-drop. I still certainly don't think it's as good as Northshire Cleric for Priest back in the day. That draw engine was just so valuable. A little bit of scaling attack here doesn't seem good enough to me compared to what Priest used to have. And I'm still doubtful of this tempo health board-based Priest thing. again, we haven't seen it work in the past. So it's really hard to put faith into it, even though they seem to be pushing a lot of cards. So yeah, card like this is fine in that world for sure, but probably not amazing. So next up for priest, here's the Shadowed Spirit, a 3-mana 4/3 with Death Rattle, deal 3 damage to the enemy hero. And this is a cool card, right? It's basically a Leper Gnome plus. We have a few of these like Leper Gnome style cards. And particularly this one's got a really nice aggressive stat line as a 4/3 on 3. If that's something that sticks on board, punching for 4 is going to hurt really hard in combination with this Death Rattle. And of course with Priest, the cool thing is there's a lot of like synergies with these kinds of Death Rattles cards that copy and duplicate and play off of and resummon and so on and so forth. You could definitely see this in like a res priest engine of some sort, just getting summoned over and over and over again as, you know, a mid-sized threat as opposed to like a Leper Gnome, which is just like kind of disposable. This is still meaty and noteworthy, which is nice when resummoning it, but also, of course, just chipping away at your opponent's health total over and over again. I think that's kind of cool. And, you know, it's one of those cards where it's like, I don't know that deck's existing right now. It needs a lot of help and support, much like every other priest card we've talked about. But its numbers are big enough that you could see that being the driving force behind a deck. And I've had certainly a lot of fun with those like Leper Gnome style priest decks for sure. So even a card like Rally with this, for instance, right? Like Rally's bringing this back with the Leper Gnome and I think that other dude's rotating. Leper Gnome might be rotated too. Who knows? But you get the idea. Some aggressive, annoying cards like this, all combined in Rally and other res effects, could really start to snowball into something pretty cool. So I don't know if this goes into that like health buff priest. Other cards we saw, right? Certainly doesn't make sense in a silence priest, but still I could see an aggro Death Rattle face priest come together behind this card. It won't be good, but by God, we're going to play it. All right, so next up here is Ritual of Doom for Warlock, a 0-mana spell. It says destroy a friendly minion. If you had 5 or more, summon a 5/5 demon. So potentially here, you know, you got a board full of 1/1 imps. You can trade one in and turn it into a 5/5. Alternatively, if you have a cool Death Rattle on board like Nerubian Egg, which is now in the core set, you could stack up some egg-style cards, trade in an egg, and get a 4/4 and a 5/5 potentially as long as your board is super wide. And of course, Warlock is pretty good at going wide, and there are certainly board states where Warlock can dump and hit 5 cards on board, and this could be the way to cap that off. I don't think it's going to be that common, frankly. Like, usually I feel like it's in that like 3 to 4 minion spot for Zoo. Getting to 5 is tough. We're losing things like Galakron summoning a ton of imps. There are some other imp cards coming, though. So, of course, it's a possibility to get to 5. But if you're already getting to 5 minions, is this really that extra oomph that's necessary to win the game? Or is there some other better follow-up potentially, right? Would you rather just have some kind of damage output or something else that serves as a way to reward you for having that wide board? That's the question for me, is like, is it enough? That said, you know, maybe just an egg deck is enough for Ritual of Doom. Maybe you just run a bunch of eggs and this is good enough. You're just happy to have a cheap, easy way to tempo those eggs and get, you know, basically a 2-mana 4/4. You're reloading your hand for Warlock anyway, so who cares if you burn through some 0-mana cards? And of course, there might be some magical combination of sticky minions on board and little imps and a Zoo-style game plan where this just gets those big boards that helps you turn those into something really threatening, because sometimes a bunch of small garbage isn't quite enough. So it's cool. I really like this design a lot. I love the look of the card, frankly. I think it's got some potential, and certainly with cards like Nerubian Egg back in standard format, keep an eye on this one. So next up here is the Enslaved Fell Lord, a 7-mana 4/10 demon with taunt, and also it damages the minions next to whomever it attacks. So a little bit of a cleave effect here mixed with a pretty big body and taunt. And, you know, my first instinct on this card was like, you know, whatever, it's just a big 7-drop, who cares, this throwaway. But, you know, I tend to undervalue these big, annoying, high health taunts. I've done it multiple times. So I'm really forcing myself to look at this one closely and saying, like, you know, maybe this is a pretty good demon in, like, bigger demon style decks. We've had some Warlock teasing stuff like that with Willow, and it felt like they always needed, like, 1 or 2 more big demons. This could be a pretty good one that, if it does stick around, is great at tidying up things like aggro boards. There's also cards like Animated Broomstick that would be very powerful with this. And if you're already running some big demons, and this fits that, and you got a broom in there as well. This card could really be kind of nuts in that regard. So the more I look at this one and think about it and look at it closely, the more opportunities I'm seeing for it to be played. Also, sometimes those big just 7 mana 4/10 stick, and that's enough. And it's those big taunt bodies. So when you've got that and a few bonuses and side angles for a card like this to make sense, a control warlock might just absolutely fall in love with this. A big demon cheat kind of warlock could fall in love with this card. I think there's a real chance this one does indeed get played, despite my first instincts kind of looking at it as a throwaway card. I think it might be a pretty good one. All right, so next up here, the Bloodsail Deckhand for Warrior, and it's a 1-mana 2/1 Pirate. Battlecry, the next weapon you play, costs 1 less. And I mean, yeah, this is like perfect for Pirate Warrior. I mean, it's a nice aggressive 1-drop. It's not very sticky, sure, it's only got 1 health, but I think you're okay with that. You just want to put bodies on board, and the fact that it's kind of free eventually because you're going to get that nice discounted weapon could really help Pirate Warrior push out some extra tempo through those weapons, or just extra pressure and damage through those weapons as well, opening up lots of other plays along the way. So absolutely, if an aggressive Pirate Warrior deck is viable, this card will be a fundamental part of it and will probably help make it viable, I think, just because this does do something so well and fits so darn well into the game plan. Beyond an aggressive Pirate Warrior, I don't know if this one's worth it. There is still this interesting application of like passing on this discount to future turns, even if a deck's like more mid-rangey. Sometimes getting that weapon down cheaper can really help you accelerate into the mid game, and playing a 2/1's kind of free along the way. So if you have any other pirate synergies or menagerie synergies that this could help double down on, it might be able to make the cut in something like an aggressive Watley, menagerie warrior basically as well. But it has a pretty good pirate already to compete against there with the 4-drop guy whose name I cannot remember right now because I'm really tired of talking about Hearthstone cards. So even in those worlds, maybe not perfect, but still another possible angle for a really fast version of that deck. So, in other words, this card's doing a lot of cool things. It makes sense from a number standpoint. It fits its archetype, its minion type, its class really, really well, all of which are usually a recipe for success. Moving on here to the Warsong Outrider, a 4-mana 5/4 with Rush. So we got like Rush Yetis these days, man, just in the core set. Of course, the stats are flipped, but otherwise, just a nice big Rush body. Take a trade, stick around as a pretty menacing 5-attack minion hanging around on board. Unlike, say, Militia Commander of old, that sort of lost its attack. This one sticks around as a threat, which, there's a more aggressively minded Rush Warrior deck, which there has been a few of those already. Why not toss this one in? That said, it is still a pretty simple minion, and, it's not going to line up that well against certain board states and minion types. So I think only certain metas will be great. If there's a bunch of 4/4s floating around, I don't know if Warsong Outrider's awesome. There's a bunch of 3/3s floating around, maybe it makes a little bit more sense. So this is one of those cards that's fine. It's solid enough. It's got Rush synergy potential. It's just a big stat stick with nice effect and some immediacy. All of those are great, but it's only going to work in certain scenarios, certain metas. It's kind of limited, I think, in its application. I don't see this being an everyday sort of card. I think some people will say like, oh my God, it's just a better Yeti. And yeah, but there's been better Rush minions at 4 mana with things like Restless Mummy in many cases. There's other better Rush minions around it on each side. So it's just, it's going to have that perfect window where it makes sense. And that's not going to happen all the time. That's going to happen pretty rarely, making this a serviceable but not amazing card in my mind. All right, so moving on here to War Cache for Warrior. It's a 3-mana spell. It's basically a Hunter's Pack, the old Hunter card that gave you 3 different things. This also gives you 3 different things. It gives you random Warrior minion, a spell, and weapon to your hand. So basically turn 1 card into 3 with some risk that maybe the cards aren't all that great. But frankly, on average, I think since those are going to be class cards in particular, they're going to be decent cards that are going to get some sort of utility for. So the ideal use case for a card like this is you're playing a slower, more control-oriented warrior, need some value in your deck. You play this card on 3 because you don't really have anything else to do anyway. You get some extra resources in hand. Maybe you get yourself a nice little bonus board clear and a little rush minion to chip into a minion and throw it away, and a weapon to help maintain support. And it sets you up essentially for your mid game, helps you fill in your curve, etc. Which, frankly, I think would be great for a lot of control warrior decks. Sometimes it's hard to fill those early turns when your hand is just full of stuff that you can't do much. This lets you turn that mana into value, basically, setting you up for later. So I could easily see this being tossed into some control warrior decks. I don't think it's going to move beyond that. Obviously, a faster deck's not going to be as willing to sacrifice that 3 mana, give up that tempo in the early game for value later, but slow decks absolutely could. So getting some extra resources, stretching your value further is exactly what control or grindy warriors want to do, and War Cash supports that pretty well. And then finally here, it's the Fog Sail Freebooter, a new pirate in the neutral set. It's a 2-mana 2/2 pirate with a battle cry. If you have a weapon equipped, deal 2 damage. And that's a lot of stuff and upside here in a 2-mana card. 2 damage ping is pretty awesome. This is like an SI7 Agent Light with a condition of weapon instead of combo, but it's also a pirate, which has some synergies there as well. And for a class like Rogue, who's basically always going to have a weapon equipped, I think this could be a really cool tool for them to get some extra chip damage, maybe just play for a miniature board swing in the early game. In both of those instances, that's great. And, occasionally this is just going to go straight to the face, even when you top deck it in the late game as that chip damage they need for lethal. That's perfect. Grab it off a secret passage, throw it face, and you're really, really happy with what you've got. So looks awesome in Rogue. You could also see this tossed into a warrior, maybe even like a shaman or a hunter as well, who just care about aggressive starts. And this minion's a great tool there. It's just damage on a stick with a condition that's definitely harder in classes outside of Rogue, but certainly still relatively reliable, I would say, making it a really nice tool. Gennarglaive Smith is a 3-star card. Illidar Inquisitor is a 4-star card. Nordrassil Druid is a 2-star card. Selective Breeder is a 3-star card. Reckoning is a 4-star card. Pursuit of Justice is a 5-star card. Focused Will is a 2-star card. Shadowed Spirit is a 3-star card. Ritual of Doom is a 3-star card. Enslaved Felllord is a 4-star card. Bloodsail Deckhand is a 4-star card. Warsong Outrider is a 2-star card. Fog Sail Freebooter is a 4-star card. All right, and that wraps it up for our new core set cards. I'm still going to do one more review for cards that have had balance changes or updates, so like tracking, lock and load, Lord Draxus, etc. A handful of those I want to talk about how much more or less impactful, more impactful, and I think in every case these cards will be. So we're going to run through those in the review following this one. So stay tuned for that. But until then, thanks much as always for watching, and until next time, game on.